There was a sluggishness to the magic in this room. It was a thick feeling, like stale air in a room that had been shuttered for years. Khadgar's face grew stern as he tried to pull more of the power of the room, the energies, into himself. This was a simple spell. If anything, it should be easier in the spell room, where such castings would be commonplace. Suddenly the young mage was swamped with a thick, fetid feel of the magic. It fell upon him in a thick blanket, crushing the spell and driving him physically to his knees. Despite himself, he cried out. Medivh was at his side at once, helping the young mage to his feet. There, he said. I didn't expect you to succeed even that well. Good try. What is it? Managed Khadgar, suddenly able to breathe again. It was like nothing I've felt before. That's good news for you then, said Medivh. The magic has been twisted here, a result of what happened earlier. You mean like a haunting, said Khadgar. Even in Karazhan I never. No, not like that, said Medivh. Something much worse. The two dead mages here were summoning demons. It's that taint that you feel. A demon was here. The larger of the two moons had risen first this evening, and now hung pregnant and silver white against a clear, star-dappled sky. Beneath the lambent moon, the peaks of the Red Ridge Mountains strained for the sky. In the daylight, the sun picked out hues of magenta and rust among the great granite peaks, but in the moonlight they were reduced to tall, proud ghosts. To the west lay the forest of Elwyn. I think that's how you say that. Its heavy canopy of great oaks and satinwoods running from the foothills to the sea. To the east, the black swamp of the Black Morass spread out, a land of marshes and low hills, bayous and backwaters, failed settlements and lurking danger. A shadow passed briefly across the moon, a raven-sized shadow, bearing for a hole in the heart of the mountain. Here a chunk had been pulled from the fastness of the Red Ridge Range, leaving behind a circular veil. Once it might have been the site of some primeval celestial impact, or the memory of an earth-shaking explosion, but the aeons had worn the bowl-shaped crater into a series of steep-edged, rounded hillocks, which were now cradled by the steep mountains surrounding them. None of the ancient trees of Elwyn could reach its altitude, and the interior of the ringed hills was barren save for weeds and tangled vines. At the center of the ringed hills lay a bare tor, as bald and as pale as a cold terrace merchant lord. Indeed, the very way the hillock rose steeply, then gentled to a near level slope at its apex, was similar in shape to a human skull. Many had noted it over the years, though only a few had been sufficiently brave or powerful or tactless to mention it to the property's owner. At the flattened peak of the tor rose an ancient tower, a thick, massive protrusion of white stone and dark mortar, a man-made eruption that shot effortlessly into the sky, scaling higher than the surrounding hills, lit like a beacon by the moonlight. There's a low wall at the base of the tower surrounding a bailey, and within those walls the tumble-down remains of a stable and a smithy, but the tower itself dominated all within the ringed hills. Once this place was called Karazhan. Once it was home of the last of the mysterious and secretive guardians of Tirisfal. Once it was a living place. Now it was simply abandoned and time lost. There was silence upon the tower, but not a stillness. In the night's embrace, quiet shapes flitted from window to window, and phantoms danced along the balconies and parapets. Less than ghosts, but more than memories, these were nothing less than pieces of the past that had become unstuck from the flow of time. These shadows of the past had been pried loose by the madness of the tower's owner, and were now condemned to play out their histories again and again in the silence of the abandoned tower. Condemned to play, but denied of any audience to appreciate them. Then in the silence, there was the soft scrape of a booted foot against stone, then another. A flash of movement beneath the lambent moon, a shadow against the white stone, a flutter of tattered red-hued cloak in the cool night air. A figure walked along the topmost parapet on the crenellated uppermost spire that years before had served as an observatory. The parapet door into the observatory screeched open on ancient hinges, then stopped, frozen by rust and the passage of time. The cloaked figure paused a moment, then placed a finger on the hinge and muttered a few choice words. The door swung open silently, the hinges made as if new. The trespasser allowed himself a little smile. The observatory was empty now. What tools that remained smashed and abandoned. The trespassing figure, almost as silent as the ghost himself, picked up a crushed astrolabe, its scale twisted in some now forgotten rage. Now it is merely a heavy piece of gold, inert and useless in his hands. There was another movement in the observatory, and the trespasser looked up. Now a ghostly figure stood nearby, near one of the many windows. The ghost, non-ghost, was a broad-shouldered man, hair and beard once dark, but now going to a premature gray at the edges. The figure was one of the shards of the past, unglued and now repeating its task, regardless of whether it had observers or not. For the moment, the dark-haired man held the astrolabe, the unbroken twin to the one in the trespasser's hands, and fiddled with a small knob along one side. A moment, a check, and a twitch of the knob. His dark brows furrowed over ghostly green eyes. A second moment, another check, another twitch. Finally, the tall, imposing figure sighed deeply and placed the astrolabe on the table that was no longer there and vanished. The trespasser nodded. Such hauntings were common even in the days when Karazhan was inhabited, though now, stripped of the control and the madness of their master, they had become more brazen. Yet these shards of the past belonged here, while he did not. He was the interloper, not they. The trespasser crossed the room to its staircase leading down, while behind him the older man flickered back into view and repeated his action, sighting his astrolabe on a planet that had long since moved to other parts of the sky. The trespasser moved down through the tower, crossing levels to reach other stairs and other hallways. No door was shut to him, even those locked and bolted or sealed by rust and age. A few words, a touch, a gesture, and the fetters flew loose. The rust dissolved into ruddy piles, the hinges restored. In one or two places, ancient wards still glowed, potent despite their age. He paused before them for a moment, considering, reflecting, searching his memory for the correct countersign. He spoke the correct word, made the correct motion with his hands, shattered the weak magic that remained, and passed on. As he moved through the tower, the phantoms of the past grew more agitated and more active. Now, with a potential audience, it seemed that these pieces of the past wished to play themselves out, if only to be made free of this place. Any sound they once possessed had long since eroded away, leaving only their images moving through the halls. The interloper passed an ancient butler in dark livery, the frail old man shuffling slowly down the empty hallway, carrying a silver tray and wearing a set of horse blinders. The interloper passed through the library, where a green-fleshed young woman stood with her back to him, poring over an ancient tome. He passed through a banquet hall, at one end a group of musicians playing soundlessly, dancers twirling in a gavotte. At the other end, a great city burned, its flames beating ineffectively against the stone walls and rotting tapestries. The trespasser moved through the silent flames, but his face grew drawn and tense as he witnessed once more the mighty city of Stormwind burn around him. In one room, 3 young men sat at a table and told now unknown lies. Metal mugs were scattered on the table's surface as well as beneath it. The trespasser stood watching this image for a long time until a phantom tavernist brought another round. Then he shook his head and pressed on. He reached nearly the ground level and stepped out on a low balcony that hung precariously to the wall, like a wasp's nest over the main entrance. There in the wide space before the tower, between the main entrance and a now collapsed stables across the bailey, stood a single ghostly image, lonely and separated. It did not move like the others, but rather stood there, waiting, tentative, a piece of the past that had not been released, a piece that was waiting for him. The immobile image was of a young man with a skunk stripe of white running through his dark, untidy head of hair. The straggling fragments of a beard, newly grown, clung to his face. A battered rucksack lay at the youth's feet, and he held a red-sealed letter with a death-like grip. This was well and truly no ghost, the trespasser knew, though the owner of this image may yet be dead, fallen in combat beneath a foreign sun. This was a memory, a shard of the past, trapped like an insect in amber, waiting for its release, waiting for his arrival. The trespasser sat on the stonework ledge of the balcony and looked out. Beyond the bailey, beyond the hillock, and beyond the ring hills, there was silence in the moonlight, as the mountains themselves seemed to be holding their breath waiting for him. The trespasser lifted a hand and intoned a series of chanted words. Softly came the rhymes and rhythms the first time, then louder, and finally louder still, shattering the calm. In the distance, wolves picked up his chant and cast it back with howling counterpoint. And the image of the ghostly youth, its feet seeming trapped in mud, took a deep breath, hoisted his rucksack of secrets to his shoulder, and slogged his way toward the main entrance of Medivh's tower.